Honda Civic has always been a more interesting choice for buyers in the Focus-sized family hatchback segment. Over 4 decades and 9 distinct generations, Honda has refined its approach with this model, perfecting a design and engineering-led package that tends to encourage brand loyalty. Conquest customers, though, have been harder for this Japanese maker to attract, hence a package of updates to this 9th generation Civic that have made it smarter, cleverer, safer and more comfortable. As a result, this underrated contender is now much improved, especially when matched to peppy but frugal 1.6 litre diesel power. It's a surprising package for the right kind of buyer.
The Honda Civic. It's a family hatchback that's always been frustratingly close to greatness, especially perhaps in this 9th generation guise, significantly updated in the form we're going to look at here. Cars of this kind were always closest to the heart of company founder Soichiro Honda. Back in the 60s, when the best the motor industry could offer the small family was something like a lumbering Morris Oxford, it was he who pioneered the idea of a compact, fuel and space-efficient family car with a high-tech air-cooled flat-4 1300cc engine. It was thinking that led to the launch of the original Civic in 1972, a model series that over the next 40 years would go on to sell over 20 million cars around the world, over 650,000 of them in the UK. Throughout those decades, there have been so many reasons why people like us have wanted to like this car. Its unique styling, its wonderfully slick gearbox, its sporty engines, its clever magic seating practicality, and its unique driver-centric dash. And sure enough, all of these things were present and correct when this Mark 9 model first appeared in 2012. But then came the if-onlys. If only the ride, refinement, cabin quality and running costs had been better. If only the lifeless power steering hadn't disguised the responsive handling. If only the pricing had been a bit more competitive. You can't afford if-onlys the way the Focus class segment is at present, and Honda knew it had to do better. So in 2014, the fight back began, first with tweaks to the suspension and power steering that significantly improved the on-road experience. Then with the addition to the range of a class-leadingly spacious Tourer Estate version. Next up with the announcement of a fearsomely potent Type R hot hatch variant. And finally, in the spring of 2015, we got a complete refreshment for the mainstream range with smarter styling, extra safety kit, a new infotainment system, more equipment and lower pricing. That's the car we've got on test here. In short, on paper at least, the Civic has been rejuvenated. Time to put it to the test. Let's face it, you'll need to have a long memory if you can recall a Honda Civic that wasn't good to drive. If we were going to put a date on the time when Civic stepped from being something a bit pedestrian to something that was a guarantee of a decent steer, it'd probably be the 6th generation car that debuted in 1996, championing a clever multi-link rear suspension system that most of its rivals subsequently copied. That was dumped for both the 8th generation version and the 9th generation design because it impinged on cabin space. But thanks to some clever trickery elsewhere on the suspension front, Honda's little hatch continued to be able to entertain. There were a few downsides though. Back in 2012, when this 9th generation model was first launched, some Civic enthusiasts complained about the lack of steering feel, whilst buyers playing greater priorities on comfort tended to take a test drive, try the firm ride, and then go and buy something else. It was to correct these issues that the engineers decided upon a surprisingly extensive roster of dynamic tweaks for this updated design. They'd been fiddling with the suspension setup since launch, and here again there have been changes to things like the roll bars, the bushes and the damper rates. All this has helped, or at least it's helped a bit. There's certainly an improvement in low-speed ride that you may well notice if you've owned an earlier version of this Mark 9 model. This Honda now gliding more easily at urban speeds over our country's terrible tarmac. Speed up though, and bigger potholes will still slightly impede your progress. It's here that you might rue Honda's decision to ditch the sophisticated multi-link suspension setup it once pioneered in this segment. Still, You don't get that on many direct rivals either. What's important is that the changes that have been made to make this Civic an easier day-to-day drive haven't diluted its rewarding feel through the bends. Indeed, that's actually been enhanced thanks to the extra steering feel you get from an altered steering rack and the addition of an agile handling assist system, Honda's version of the kind of torque vectoring setup first introduced to this segment by the Ford Focus. During tight cornering at speed, this imperceptibly brakes the wheel at the inside of a curve. When power is applied, the excess torque then flows to the outer wheel that can better use it, which helps to maximise traction and makes the car steer through the bend precisely and power out of it more quickly. Software tweaks to the stability control system also make unnecessary electronic interference less frequent too when you're simply trying to enjoy yourself at the wheel. That you'll be able to do that in this car is something that you'll be aware of right from the get-go, because everything about it feels so driver-centric. The perfectly positioned seat and pedals, the way the gear lever falls beautifully to hand, the way the futuristic dash delivers everything you need to know in perfect line of sight. As the miles roll by, you'll be struck by the near-perfect weighting and smoothness of the brake and clutch pedals and the lovely snickety precision of the 6-speed gearbox. In short, you don't need an expensively powerful engine to feel fast in this car. And you won't get one either, not unless you opt for the Type R hot hatch variant with its 310 PS 2-litre VTEC turbo petrol engine. This is a car capable of 62 miles an hour from rest in just 5.7 seconds en route to 167 miles an hour. Mainstream versions of this Honda give you only 3 engine choices, none of which is neck-snappingly rapid. The least expensive alternative is the 100 PS 1.4i VTEC petrol unit. This is a leisurely performer that gets to 62 miles an hour in 13.4 seconds on the way to 160 miles an hour. Far more rewarding, though notably less efficient, is the other volume petrol power plant, the 1.8i VTEC derivative. With 142 PS on tap, this offers reasonable performance on paper. 0 to 62 miles an hour in 9.1 seconds en route to 134 miles an hour, but only if you rev the thing harder than most owners will want to. The necessity for this is down to the fairly feeble amount of pulling power on offer, just 174 Newton meters, and you have to storm up to 6,500 RPM to get that. Plus, it'll be even worse if you saddle the thing with the extra cost 5-speed automatic gearbox. Our advice then would be to bypass these engine options and, if funds permit, opt instead for the 120 PS 1.6i DTEC diesel power plant that I'm trying here. In the past, Honda has sold cars with diesel engines about as willingly and satisfyingly as McDonald's will sell you a salad. But this one's different. True, it's no ball of fire. 62 miles an hour takes 10.5 seconds on the way to 129 miles an hour. But more importantly, there's a lusty 300 Newton meters of pulling power available. That's nearly twice as much as the alternative 1.8-litre iVTEC petrol variant can offer. This makes the car feel a lot more willing than those figures might suggest, as well as facilitating a 1,400 kilogram braked towing weight that some buyers of the Tourer Estate version might really value. As with ordinary petrol Civics, the engine in the iDTEC model sits crossways under the bonnet and drives the front wheels through a standard 6-speed manual gearbox. Unlike the regular petrol units though, it's a power plant that seems to have been properly tuned to suit the character of the car, feeling happiest when simply surfing along at modest speeds, leaving plenty in reserve. There's little of the harshness and vibration you often get from some other small diesels when pulling away, even if you're in a gear higher than perhaps you ought to be. Nor is there any need to bother pushing it much past 3,500 revs because it's done its best work by then. Instead, simply plug it into the next gear and take a moment to appreciate the noise reduction work that Honda has put into all Civic models in recent times. Extra insulation in the rear wheel arches, the roof and the engine bay, plus better door seals all round and thicker front side windows, has made this one of the most refined cars in the segment, with unpleasant frequencies of engine, tyre and wind noise filtered out more effectively. This is one of the things that make this car a better long-distance travelling companion than it ever used to be. In fact, it's a better car than it used to be all round. Don't get us wrong, Honda still has work to do here in comparison with some class leaders, but the improvements made are significant. significant enough to merit your taking another look at this Civic if you're amongst those who've tried one and decided against it in the past. It just shows how much a careful program of development can achieve. The 9th generation Civic offers buyers a choice of two body styles, the 5-door hatch or a spacious tourer estate. In this hatch guise, it certainly remains one of the better looking models in the Focus class segment, with looks that were carefully evolved by the original version of this 9th generation design and have been further developed here by this facelifted variant. In improved form, this Civic gets a sleeker front bumper, smarter headlamps and de rigueur integrated LED daytime running lights that deliver a unique visual signature. It's all just enough to keep it looking current. Those changes apart, things are much as before, which means that buyers of this hatch version still get this unusual split rear screen, a distinctive design element that's been easier to live with since the designers of this Mark 9 model narrowed this central spoiler and dropped it further down to create greater rearward visibility that these days allows space for a rear wiper. This bisecting bar, supplied either in classy piano black or in body colour as here, links revised arc-shaped combination rear lamps that now feature LED technology and are raised well out of harm's way above a restyled bumper. As ever, this Civic features class-leading aerodynamics, an area in which huge efforts have been expended. The design team of the original version of this car having borrowed aerodynamicists from Honda's F1 racing program to help them perfect the slippery shape. Hence the careful detailing, things like the underbody panels that direct airflow around the car, or the little ribbed sections you'll find on the tail lamps. The overall result is a 0.27 CD drag factor, sleek enough to embarrass most rivals. Must backseat passengers pay for the coupe-style shape? Well, to some extent, yes. The side windows that incorporate rear door handles hidden within their frames are certainly smaller than is usual in this class. Compensation when you take a seat inside here at the back is provided by plentiful legroom and a near flat floor which frees up space if necessary for a central rear passenger. Headroom for really tall occupants may be a little restricted for some. You'll struggle a bit if you're over 6 feet, but most will be fine, especially if they take advantage of the reclining seat mechanism for greater comfort on longer journeys. That's an MPV style touch that might prompt you to also wonder whether these seats might slide back and forth, but they don't do that because they can do something cleverer still. If you've a tall load to carry, say a plant from the garden centre or an electrical item, you can flip the base up, cinema seat style. If you're wondering why other rivals can't offer this kind of versatility, it's because they often have complicated multi-link suspension systems taking up space that Honda thinks buyers would rather see devoted to passenger room or luggage capacity. Hence this Civic's simpler torsion beam suspension setup and its designer's clever placement of the fuel tank under the front floor. These measures together freeing up an enormous 477 litre boot capacity. To give you some perspective on that, you're talking 97 litres more than you get in a Volkswagen Golf and a massive 161 litres more than is offered by a Ford Focus. You'll find 75 litres of that capacity in a useful underfloor compartment that's as spacious as it is because, rather annoyingly, you can't specify a proper space-saver spare wheel. As usual, if you need more room, you can push forward the 60/40 split folding rear backrest in a simple dive-down motion to create a completely flat 1,367 litre load bay that's 1,600 millimetres long and 1,350 millimetres wide, big enough for 3 extra-large Samsonite cases, 3 large golf bags, or, if you're an outdoorsy type, 3 mountain bikes with their front wheels removed. Need more? Then you'll need the Tourer Estate model, a body style with 235 millimetres of extra length, all of it devoted to luggage capacity, that sees this variant able to offer as much as 624 litres in total, up to tonneau cover level. Flatten the magic seat folding mechanism in a Civic Tourer and you can free up as much as 1,668 litres. And with this variant, you've the flexibility of a 117 litre underfloor compartment too. Time to take a seat up front, a position that will deliver a surprise or two if you're not familiar with Civic culture. There still isn't a cockpit we can think of this side of a motor show concept car that looks more willfully futuristic, with its dual plane architecture and mixture of digital and analog instrumentation. In principle, it sounds like a mixed up mess. In practice, though, it all works really well. Directly ahead of you are three deeply recessed sporty dials with metallic surround trims. And above them lies what Honda rather pretentiously calls the driver interface zone, an upper display that arcs over the main instrument binnacle and is viewed above the steering wheel rim, gathering essential information like speed at the natural point of eye focus. Also conveniently in your eye line is a small screen sited slightly to the left that updates you on things like the time, plus audio and trip computer functions. The other design key point in this cabin is what the designers call the information interface zone. Essentially this area in the centre of the dash, just above the perfectly positioned gear stick. This is where you'll not only find the air conditioning controls, but above them, the key interior change that's been made to this revised model, namely the addition of this larger 7-inch Honda Connect colour infotainment touchscreen. Provided you avoid entry-level trim, this Android-based setup is standard across the range, controlling stereo and informational functions, dealing with the optional Garmin sat-nav system and providing full internet browsing when you're stationary. For that kind of use, this setup should feel just like your smartphone to use, thanks not only to familiar pinch, swipe and tap functionality, but also to a clever mirror link function that allows you to mirror your mobile handset screen display and gain access to its applications. You can personalise that touchscreen with a choice between two different skins and download your favourite apps onto it via the Honda App Centre. In fact, one key app, Aha, will come preloaded with the system, giving you access to thousands of stations of audio, spanning everything from music to news, podcasts and audiobooks, plus social media and location-based services. The integrated interface should make finding everything from a Twitter account to weather updates so easy, even I could manage to do it. And Aha also includes points of interest searches, helping users locate things like nearby restaurants and hotels. It's all very welcome, if hardly unique in this segment. One thing that is, though, is the perfected driving position. Honda nearly always gets this small but crucial element right with its cars, and this Civic is no exception, aided by rake and reach adjustment for the wonderfully tactile steering wheel. There's a beautifully supportive driver's seat too, with height adjustment that'll be welcome for taller folk having to sight the seat base further down to compensate for the cabin's slightly restricted headroom. That's not an issue for me, but it is slightly annoying that you have to adjust the rear backrest with this awkward lever rather than the usual rotary wheel. On to practicalities. We like this hatch model's distinctive split rear screen, but it does somewhat restrict your over-the-shoulder rear three-quarter visibility. This isn't an issue on the glassy Tourer Estate model, and to be fair, even on this hatch variant, it's now been mitigated to some extent with a standard fitment of a colour reverse parking camera on most models in the range. On a less sensible note, this Civic Sport model's signature drilled metal pedals deserve a mention too. First, for being gloriously over the top, and second, for being exactly in the right place. On to fit and finish. It's certainly true that the choice of trim and materials, though much better than before, still doesn't have the hewn from granite feel you get in, say, Volkswagen Group products. And there are some slightly awkward touches, like this blanked off panel for the optional push-button start system most owners won't get. Still, some of the detailing is nice. This white stitching, for example, and the British factory in Swindon has certainly screwed it all together very well. More importantly, perhaps, customer satisfaction surveys without number all suggest the cabin quality to be durable. There's plenty of practicality too. Reasonably sized door bins, a spacious glove box, a holder for your sunglasses, and space between the front seats for a couple of 1 litre bottles, plus a further couple of 350 millilitre bottles. There's a meritocracy when it comes to D-segment family hatchback pricing. Buyers expect to pay a little more for a Volkswagen Golf than they would for a Ford Focus or a Vauxhall Astra, knowing that they'll get higher quality and a greater depth of engineering. Originally, with this 9th generation Civic, Honda hoped customers would take the same view and pay a price for the car that was slightly above the mainstream. It didn't work out that way. And with this facelifted model, the sticker figures have been significantly reduced. Some variants in the range costing over £1,500 less than their direct predecessors. That means a focused or Astra-style pricing span that'll see you paying somewhere between £16,000 and £27,000 for mainstream versions of this car, though you'd have to find around £30,000 if you were to opt for the potent Type R hot hatch version. As for body styles, there's a choice between either this 5-door hatch or, for a £1,000 premium, the smart Tourer Estate variant. In the mainstream lineup, there's a premium of around £1,600 to go from the entry-level 1.4-litre iVTEC petrol model to the much pokier 1.8-litre iVTEC petrol variant. If you want a petrol-powered Civic Tourer Estate, you'll need to pay that, as this more spacious body style doesn't come with a feebler engine. If you are happy with the 1.8, your dealer will doubtless remind you that it's the only engine in the range offering the option of automatic transmission, a 5-speed unit requiring a premium of around £1,400. The engine we've been trying here, though, is the one that nearly all Civic buyers will really want, the 120 PS 1.6-litre iDTEC diesel unit that's offered with both body styles. The price reductions have made this desirable power plant more accessible, but you'll still need a £19,000 budget for it in its lowest spec form. On to the value proposition all of that represents. Despite the price reductions, Honda has no intention of positioning this car amongst the very cheapest models in the segment. So if you're looking at the base 1.4-litre iVTEC petrol Civic variant, you'll still find it priced between £1,000 and £1,500 above cars like 1.4-litre petrol versions of the Kia Ceed or the Citroën C4, a 1.33-litre Toyota Auris, or a Peugeot 308 1.2 VTI. Otherwise, though, the pricing of the least expensive version of the Honda looks very keen. After all, a base 1.4-litre VVTi Vauxhall Astra wouldn't cost you much less. And this Civic's £16,000 entry-level figure allows the Japanese maker to match the pricing you'll find with the cheapest petrol-powered family hatchbacks you'd be able to get from many value brands. Cars like Seat's Leon, Skoda's Octavia, Nissan's Pulsar and Hyundai's i30. And you'd save around £800 over the cost of a comparably powerful 1.6-litre petrol-powered Ford Focus or Renault Megane. In other words, for the same or even a little less than you'd pay for something ordinary, you could have a Honda. A number of potential buyers will be attracted by that prospect. Just don't expect a 1.4-litre Civic's frugality, cleanliness or performance to match the figures achieved by some of the more modern entry-level petrol power plants in this segment, like the 1-litre T EcoBoost engine in a Ford Focus, the 1.2 ETHB 110 units of Peugeot 308, or the Skyactiv G engines in a Mazda 3. Still, your Honda salesperson will have a ready argument to counter that, pointing out that all of these cars give you a power output of only around 100 PS for a budget of around £17,500. The kind of money that could buy you much more performance in a Civic, were you to choose this Honda in its other 1.8 iVTEC petrol guise. To be specific, a 1.8-litre petrol Civic will give you 142 PS for less than the cost of an 85 PS 1.2-litre TSI Volkswagen Golf. Yes, the efficiency of this 1.8 is unremarkable, but it's quick, characterful, it sounds great. Ultimately, it all comes down to what you want. What most Civic buyers want, though, as I mentioned earlier, isn't a petrol power plant, but the engine we've been trying here, the 1.6-litre iDTEC diesel option. Yes, the £19,000 budget it requires is one of the higher figures needed for diesel ownership in this segment, but then this engine's 120 PS output is higher than that of many rivals too, so make sure you're comparing like with like. As long as you do that, then this diesel Civic looks reasonable value. We've crunched the numbers so that you don't have to, and look closely at the stats of base diesel family hatches that at first glance seem to give you a bit more for your money. We're talking here of cars that can undercut this iDTEC Honda by up to £1,000 or so on the price. 1.6-litre black pump-fueled versions of models like Vauxhall's Astra, Seat's Leon, Skoda's Octavia, Kia's Ceed and Hyundai's i30, plus 1.5-litre DCI versions of Renault's Megane and Nissan's Pulsar. In all these cases, you're talking of cars that can't quite match this diesel Civic in terms of either performance or running costs, or both. Bear in mind too that thanks to the price reductions Honda's made to this facelifted Mark 9 model Civic range, there are now plenty of popular rival diesel-powered D-segment family hatches of this kind that in their pokier guises will cost you significantly more than you'll pay for this car. Even something like a comparably powerful Citroën C4 requires extra cash, and you'll need to find £700 to £800 more than Honda's charging here if you want to match this ID.Tech Civic's blend of performance and efficiency in a 120 PS Ford Focus 1.5 DCI or a Peugeot 308 1.6 Blue HDI. It's also worth pointing out that you'll need another £1,500 to get yourself a feebler 105 PS Volkswagen Golf 1.6 TDI. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is a Civic you really want, then you're going to need to know just how generous Honda has been when it comes to standard equipment. And the answer is that most of what you're going to need comes as standard. So even the least expensive S variant gets a kit tally you might not normally expect to find on a bottom-of-the-range model, coming complete with features like 16-inch alloy wheels, LED daytime running lights, climate-controlled air conditioning, Bluetooth compatibility for your phone, clever flip-up magic seats, an econ mode to help you drive more efficiently, and headlights that stay on at night to see you to your front door. More expected inclusions run to a multifunction steering wheel, driver's seat height adjustment, power windows and heated mirrors, an alarm immobiliser and a 4-speaker CD audio system with DAB digital radio, plus USB and aux-in connectivity. If you're coming to this car from an old pre-2012 8th generation Civic, it might also be worth pointing out that you get a rear wiper too. Almost unbelievably, that Mark 8 Civic model never had one, the designers talking of droplet dispersing aerodynamics and forgetting how useless that is in slow traffic. The major option for Civic S buyers is satellite navigation, which comes packaged up with the Honda Connect 7-inch colour infotainment touchscreen. Via this, you can also access internet radio, download apps from the Honda App Centre, listen to a higher quality 6-speaker stereo and use a rear parking camera. Upgrade yourself to the next trim level up in the Civic range hierarchy, SE+, and you get Honda Connect as standard, though you'll still need to pay extra for navigation. The £2,000 premium that SE Plus spec requires also gets you features like front fog lights, cruise control, auto headlamps and wipers, leather for the steering wheel and gear knob, power folding mirrors, and on petrol models, larger 17-inch wheels. Inevitably though, of course, the real niceness is to be found on the plushest models or on the options list. Things like leather upholstery, a glass roof, privacy glass, keyless start and a high-end 320-watt 8-speaker audio system. Here I've got the top sport variant there to offer a more dynamic look that Honda hopes will bridge the gap between mainstream versions of this car and the top Type R hot hatch variant. To that end, it comes complete with a body-coloured tailgate spoiler, a sporty mesh front grille, alloy pedals and the smart shiny black sport alloy 17-inch wheels. You can pay extra for even larger 18-inch wheels if you really want to ruin the ride, and there are various option packs that will give the exterior and interior of your car a more bespoke look. One thing you can't specify is a space-saver rear wheel. So if you're stranded on the roadside on a wet and windy night and can't be bothered to wait for roadside rescue, you'll have to struggle away with one of those tyre inflation mobility kits. On to safety, where the major change lies with the standardisation across the range of Honda's City Brake Active system, there to scan the road ahead for potential collision hazards at speeds of under 80 miles an hour. If one is detected, you'll be warned. If you don't respond or aren't able to, the car will automatically brake itself to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. If you want to go even further than that and have avoided entry-level trim, there's the affordable option of a driver assistance safety pack, the DASP option that's been fitted to the car we've been trying here. You really need to think about ticking the box for this option if you're a Civic buyer, for it includes a whole raft of clever electronic features that together will make it very difficult to hurt yourself in this car. Things like a forward collision warning system that gives you much the same kind of functionality as the City Brake Active setup, but at higher speeds, monitoring the distance and closing rate between you and the vehicle in front as you drive, and warning you when you're too close, or even applying the brakes if a collision becomes likely. The DASP pack also includes a blind spot information system to stop you from dangerously pulling out to overtake in front of another car, a lane departure warning system to stop dozy drivers from veering out of their lanes on the highway, a cross-traffic monitor there to stop you from reversing out from a parking space into the path of another car, a high beam support system that'll automatically dip your lights for you at night in the face of oncoming traffic. Plus there's traffic sign recognition that pictures road signs as you pass them for display on the dash, and an auto-dimming rear view mirror to make nighttime driving easier. Even without all this electronic trickery, the Civic scores strongly in terms of safety, hence its 5-star Euro NCAP test showing. All models get the usual twin front, side and curtain airbags, though no knee bag is included. Plus you get all kinds of electronic acronyms to hopefully ensure that you never have to use them. There's an agile handling assist system to help with corner turning, and vehicle stability assist, Honda's version of the kind of ESC stability control system you'd now expect on a car of this kind. Also par for the course is an ABS braking setup with emergency braking assist to aid in panic stops, advertised to following motorists by automatically activating brake and hazard warning lights. Other standard safety features include hill start assist to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, active front head restraints to minimise accident whiplash, and ISOFIX child seat fastenings, plus a front end section of the car designed to minimise pedestrian injuries. Independency of thought is one of the things we've always admired about Honda. Take eco-friendliness. Just as this improved Civic was being launched, and just as many of its rivals were introducing hybrid models, this Japanese brand ditched its most iconic hybrid design, the Insight. Fashionable greenness, who needs it? There isn't even a frugally focused version of this car available, the kind of tweaked, eco-minded diesel variant that most competitors offer. Not that this model lineup really needs that. The 1.6 litre ID Tech 120 PS diesel variant I'm trying here does, after all, deliver 78.5 miles per gallon on the combined cycle, enough to facilitate an impressive potential single fuel tank range that would probably exceed 830 miles. That's enough to get this car from its Swindon factory birthplace to Munich in southern Germany without stopping. The ID Tech unit's strong on cleanliness too, putting out a 94 grams per kilometre of CO2 figure that's really not bad for a car of this size and weight, and looks even more impressive when you start to stack this model up against the competition. Essentially, if you want a focus-size family hatch with this kind of performance that's going to better those kind of returns, then you're going to have to pay more for it. Bear in mind that the figures I've quoted here are based on standard 5-door hatch variant with standard 15-inch wheels. If you opt for the Tourer Estate version, you'll hit those returns by about 5%. And of course, as usual, fitting larger wheels will also have a small effect on your overall figures. Onto petrol power, an area where this Civic has never been quite as strong. Recognising this, Honda has fine-tuned the entry-level 1.4 litre iVTEC unit to get it back on the pace, and the result is a combined cycle return of 52.3 miles per gallon and a CO2 reading of 116 grams per kilometre. True, that is still not up to the standards of the most modern comparable engines in this class, say Ford's 1 litre EcoBoost unit, the 1.2 litre DIGT engine you get in a Nissan Pulsar, or the 1.2 litre TSI engines fitted to Volkswagen's Golf, Seat's Leon or Skoda's Octavia. The important thing is, though, that this Honda is now class competitive with just about everything else in the segment. Or at least it is in the 1.4 litre petrol form. Opt for your Civic with the 1.8 litre iVTEC petrol engine and the picture's not quite so rosy. Here, combined cycle fuel economy falls to 48.7 miles per gallon, while your CO2 emissions rise to 137 grams per kilometre, or 44.8 miles per gallon and 148 grams per kilometre if you go for the automatic gearbox exclusive to the 1.8 litre petrol version. The returns of all the manual models are aided by the standard fitment of a stop and start system. Honda calls it idle stop, to cut the engine when you don't need it, sitting in heavy traffic or stopped at crossings and traffic lights, for example. Plus, there are vents in the lower front grille of diesel models that open and close as necessary to optimise airflow. There's also the usual gear shift indicator light on the dash, and if you've got the Honda Connect infotainment system, various fuel-related trip computer readouts that'll demonstrate how successful your recent efforts of frugality have been. Going further than that requires driver cooperation, which the Japanese brand is seeking with two further standard systems borrowed from its planet-friendly hybrid development. First, there is Eco Assist, which uses the car's speedometer illumination colour to advise users on how their driving style is affecting fuel economy. The lighting is green when the car is being driven efficiently, white-green if you start to push on a bit, and just white during heavy acceleration or deceleration. That's an automatic feature, but Honda's other contribution to enviro-conscious motoring is something that you actually have to select, the Econ system. Pushing this green button on the dash activates a gentler throttle map and tweaks the air conditioning for greater efficiency. But wouldn't you want that all the time, with perhaps a power button for pushing on? It all amounts to the same thing, I suppose. At least you feel green-fingered the way Honda has configured it. On to the warranty, a 3-year 90,000 mile deal, which is a bit better than most rivals who tend to offer guarantees limited to 60,000 miles. There's also a fixed price comprehensive aftercare package called 5, which includes 5 years servicing, 5 years warranty and 5 years roadside assistance. This gets incorporated into the monthly cost of a new Civic on some PCP packages, or it can be added to the purchase price of a new model for a one-off payment of just £500. In a world where a roadside assistance package might alone cost you over £100 a year, that seems like a wise investment. Residual values of this 9th generation Civic have held up pretty well, so there's no reason to think that those of this improved variant will be any different. Though you can't expect them to be as good as those of the class-leading Golf, they'll be comfortably better than mainstream Focus or Astra models in this segment. As for insurance groupings, well, they're now more affordable thanks to the standard inclusion of a city brake active setup that can, if necessary, automatically brake the car to avoid accidents at urban speeds. As a result, buyers will now be looking at Group 5E for the petrol 1.4, Groups 13 to 15E for the petrol 1.8, and Groups 15 to 16E for the 1.6 iVTEC diesel. Kaizen, the Japanese approach to continuous improvement, characterises every aspect of this much improved 9th generation Civic. This car may look similar to the Mark 9 model we first saw in 2012, but under the skin it's a far more competitive prospect. The upgraded infotainment setup, the more comfortable driving experience, and the fact that these days there's a wider range of trim options, plus an estate body style and a Type R hot hatch variant, all of it makes a big difference to this car's appeal. All of these things are welcome, but they haven't diluted the individual appeal of a package that remains distinctively different in the Focus-sized family hatchback segment. The sporty feel of the engines, the brilliant magic seat practicality of the cabin, and the distinctive looks all continue to underline the way that Honda isn't afraid to go against the grain when designing a car of this kind. The 1.6 litre iVTEC diesel power plant we've been trying here is another plus. Other brands offer you lower powered diesels that are frugal but feeble, or higher powered ones that are pokey but pricey to buy and run. This Honda's engine offers a great blend of both and marries that to a driving experience more interesting and rewarding than most other rivals can offer. Of course, none of that is to suggest this car to be perfect. The 1.8 litre petrol option remains less efficient than many owners would like. Not everyone will get on with the futuristic dashboard layout, and there are still cheaper choices in this segment. Ultimately though, what's important about this upgraded Civic is the way it shows how Honda has changed. This is now a brand able to continue to develop cars that people might really want to buy, as opposed to models that many of them will find merely technically intriguing. A manufacturer at the cutting edge of diesel development, and a company able to understand the wants and needs of people beyond its home shores. With this model, it's finally clear that in all these areas, at long last, Honda has got the message. The result is a car they market as being excitingly practical. Drive one, and you may just agree that it is.